Pickaxe.
Hello, and welcome to the Chance Encounters podcast. We've been running board game cafes around the UK for about 7 years now. From hen do's to family reunions, first dates to breakups, we've recommended the perfect game for every situation, and now we want a fresh challenge. Every episode we'll be inviting a guest on to put our board game knowledge to the test. They'll come armed with an abstract and absurd scenario, and it's up to us to figure out what the situation calls for and recommend a game that totally tips their hell cow. Whoever's recommendation our guest loves the most will score a point, and at the end of the series, one person will be crowned the Titan of Board Games. We are legally allowed to give out that crown. I have checked it with the lawyers. I am Richard Scarsbrook, and I have a dear love for anything that requires a spreadsheet, so board games are totally up my alley, and any points-related things, ask me. I'll give you a spreadsheet for it. I am joined by my co-host, Ben!
Hello, I'm Ben. I'm with the Yogscast, where I make videos, but I'm also a massive nerd and I love board games. I also enjoy a spreadsheet, but I do need it really heavily themed up with some fantasy or sci-fi elements to keep me interested. So when I'm at work, people do ask me if I'm working or playing a game, but I assure you it's just a very heavily themed spreadsheet.
Amazing. And our guest guru for this week is Dickie.
Hi, I'm Dickie. I have been working for Chance Encounters in a variety of fun, basically just doing fun things for Chance Encounters for a very long time now. Currently running events like Blood and Cocked Hat and everything, and I tend to have different grid-based preferences to spreadsheets. Spreadsheets not my thing, not really.
Are you more of a hexagon spreadsheet of a...
Ooh. I mean, no. I've never seen one of those. I mean, I'm sure I'd prefer it because it's not a spreadsheet, but like...
I've never thought about that.
They're like a necessary evil in my mind.
Would a hexagon spreadsheet be better? I mean, in terms of D&D, like there's a raging war between hexagons and squares. Spreadsheet. I'm going to be staying up tonight thinking about that all the time.
You're going to be searching for some kind of Google Chrome add-on to convert all of your spreadsheets.
Oh my god, yes. And our guests this week, it's our first time having two people on, so we'll see how this goes. We've got Twogether Studios, Jenn, Ellis, and Keith Baker.
Hello. Okay, I guess we have to talk about spreadsheets, which, believe it or not, as game designers, we use a lot of. I do believe that you got to spice them up. A little pivot table here, a little pre-done drop down, a little links.
I prefer to leave the spreadsheets to you, frankly.
Well, isn't that just
that's
really,
why we're a team?
That's privilege right there. If
Yeah.
you're asking me. But, how many Gloom expansions are?
Well, that's a good point. Every Gloom expansion is a spreadsheet for sure.
Knowing how many character limits are available in that little tiny space.
The problem is, whenever you do a Gloom spreadsheet, you know it's going to crash. I mean, it just... That's
true.
The nature of the beast.
That's true.
Wait, you put so much into a spreadsheet that it actually crashes the spreadsheet?
The maximum on, it used to be, I have not pushed the limit on this. The maximum lines on a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet is 30,000. That I know for a reason. So, but that was when I was in software development and things like that. So.
Oh, okay. This isn't like the Lost Gloom expansion that's
No,
like 30,000 cards.
I'd have said yes. That would have been so much better.
But
Just so many ideas.
but something.
Big boxes of everything nowadays.
Gloom expansion. That's how you win.
Yeah. That's yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for taking time away from your spreadsheets to come on the podcast. And I hear you've come along with a scenario, perhaps?
We have not talked about it in advance.
Okay.
So,
Because mine would have been set in Eberron.
Yes.
I would be saying you're about to be swallowed by a dragon.
All right. Maybe we should do like an exquisite corpse where I start and then we come up with like a wild thing both. Okay.
Let's do that. Okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm walking in to Chance Encounters. I've walked to the bottom of the Christmas steps because I'm in Bristol, right?
Love it.
open the blue door. I walk in, I go to the counter, and I say, well, I'm meeting my date. We've been dating for about a year. He likes word games. He plays Wordle every day. But he's kind of a terrible speller. We definitely want a 2-player game. I want something well balanced for 2-player. They love fantasy stuff. He plays D&D. Throw that in there. I don't want anything bigger than your smallest table, which let's assume, and I know this is not true. We want something that we're going to love so much, we're going to play it on train rides as well. So like the little tiny tray table on a train as well.
Yep.
Something that travels really well. He likes word games and D&D and kind of fantasy stuff. I love anything cute. So, any kitten themed things I would do, any other things. Oh, and if it has dice, that would be great. I love dice.
Okay.
Ooh,
Very specific. I think that's a pretty solid, complicated scenario.
Yeah, if you have any questions for me, let me know. I can kind of clarify a little.
So to wrap that up, that's preferably a 2-player board game that's quite small, that is themed around D&D cats, and for someone that can or can't spell, doesn't matter which one. And length, how long would you like this game to last? Are they short train journeys?
Yeah, no more than an hour. I can't do anything more than an hour.
See, I was totally just going to go for, I want a game where like you have a family, but you have to kill them and just totally see if we can get all of our games recommended in a single thing. But I'm here for the cat dice word game.
Yeah. And these are very typical. So I was telling the team here on the podcast before is I love finding games for people. It is one of my favorite things. It is like the perfect, it's like the spreadsheet flowchart in my head when people talk, right? When they say all the things that they want. Keith and I used to run all of the events on Joko Cruise, which is a full ship geek cruise charter, and we had a board game library with a team that would recommend games to people, and a library of 800 titles and events and how to play events and things. And so in addition to designing games, we like having that experience of people kind of coming up and asking what they like is an amazing experience. People sometimes don't always ask exactly what is they only know what to ask for what they've already played or what they know exists. So I'm very intrigued about where you kind of take this recommendation.
Yeah. There's a lot of people, when they're asking for games, they don't tell you certain things, and then you think you've got the perfect match, and you give them the game, and then they're just like, oh no, I hate cards.
Yeah.
I don't want any cards in my game.
Oh, Sagrada looks so great. Oh, except everyone's colorblind except me. It's
So that would have been really good information to know before I went into this.
I did recommend a game called Hues and Cues to someone who was colorblind. I didn't realize that until afterwards. So I was like, this is such a great game. And they're like, sounds perfect, but I just can't see anything. I was like, yeah, fair enough.
No, there are those limitations, aren't there, with colorblindness, and things need to be double coded for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, this is a really good ask. I've had some terrible asks in my time at Chance Encounters, but I feel like I have a couple of options already. I had one guy come up to me one day and just went, I want a 7-player game that's got lasers in it. That's all you get, lasers.
What did you make again?
I spent 15 minutes with him. Recommended 8 games. His criticism of every single one of them was that it wasn't Battle Royale, which, as far as I'm aware, is not a board game. And then I palmed him off to another member of staff. That's my professional work story.
You can't leave me hanging like that. I need to know what game he ended up playing.
One of our gurus lovely Mark Doddle, gave him The Captain is Dead, which I didn't know is 7-player.
I did not know that was 7 players either.
Feels like it'd be an absolute nightmare at 7 players, but then again, I think that about a lot of games.
Yeah, a lot of people are just always like, I want a really complex layered game, but like for so many people, I'm like, that's 6 people who are waiting at least 20 minutes.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it's, a 20-minute game for 3 players ends up being like 4 hours for 7.
I thought like he meant with actual lasers, like, when they need to reflect lasers off of mirrors to, I've seen that out there.
So since my question was about couples, and we have, we know quite a few people who own board game cafes in the States, and we've actually done some panels with them about gaming as, partners, or finding games for people. If your partner doesn't necessarily play a lot of games, like what's something in the middle and like how to best approach it. But a lot of their experience just comes from watching a lot of people on dates. And I just kind of wonder, you have a lot of experience in kind of maybe being an observer of this. Do you have one tip of not just the game, but like how to like couples approach a game so that they're not like tossing the appetizers at each other in frustration?
I kind of want to know the opposite. Is there a game that always just ruins someone's date? Like you get it out and you watch them and you're like, oh my God, no, someone go stop them. That game is going to ruin this date.
Photosynthesis? I think photosynthesis is like, yeah.
I literally had a date ruined by photosynthesis. It looks like it's going to be this lovely, chill game. And it's not. It's just mean.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of things here. This is one of our questions when we interview gurus, is what kind of thing would you recommend for a first date? And there's normally some quite interesting answers. I think one of the best ones we had was something like Ghost Blitz or something dexterity based, because there's more risk of people touching hands and it being a bit flirty. The one that always looks like it's going to be a terrible date is Fog of Love, because it starts asking questions, but it tends to be not a great one for new couples. But when we've had old couples come in, one of our colleagues came in and played it with their partner, and we were terrified because they were having a full-blown argument about you never put the washing out and you never do this, and just going into this huge row very loudly in the center of the cafe. And it turns out that they'd just been playing the game and were having the best time of all time. We just thought
they just got really into the role play.
They got really into the role play and had this full-blown argument, terrifying the rest of the cafe. And then we were like, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, it was great. It was so good. Everyone else just leaves this huge sigh of relief. Had to send a member of staff up there to be like, this is kind of freaking people out, guys.
Take away the knives from table 8.
But yeah, I mean, first dates is always a thing that is nerve-wracking, right? We've had customers come in and revise. The day before a date, they've come in and be like, can you teach me the rules to these games so that I can seem, like I know what I'm doing tomorrow, and I don't show myself up. And yeah, it's a really, it's a fine line sometimes.
Sure, I mean, that could always be words of trolling.
I just want to win.
But yeah, I mean, yeah. You have to, I think...
Just going to assert my dominance on this date. Make sure everyone knows I'm the big game dog.
You would be surprised, Ben. You would be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that could be telling, right? If somebody is has to hold all the instructions and has to feel like they know all the answers, that's not really how relationships really work well. You're both figuring things out together. So I can see that that's the other side. But if you're just I invited them here and I want to make sure that they have a good time and put a little effort in, that's different, I guess. So, yeah
I've always wondered if you ever go to a pub and then you just say, oh, can I have my usual? There's an element of in British culture where that seems to be a really nice thing. You'd be like, people know me, I'll have my usual. But if you went to the games cafe and that was the situation, would that be would they just be like, oh, okay, this guy knows too much about the board games? Are we're gonna have to pull it back a little bit?
Well, isn't that interesting? It's also like, what's the perception of that other person of something that you enjoy? Like, and if they're like kind of embarrassed by the fact that you're, regular Joe and at the place, then it's probably a red flag.
Which is why we play Red Flag.
Yeah.
How many board game references can we get in this entire podcast?
Oh, there's another local designer
about that. It's life.
Oh
my God. The puns will never stop.
I don't have a monopoly on.
Oh, this is definitely my jam. This is great. There's a situation with my family where we literally will sit around the conversation, like having a normal conversation, then someone will start the puns, and then we'll just sit around like it goes just dead silence where we're all just racking our brains for the next pun, and we'll do this for about 15 minutes until someone's just like, I'm done here. What's going on?
A Punderdome is a good one. That's a UK based designer, right?
No, I think Punderdome was US based. It was based
Big Potato Games or something.
No, Punderdome is a game that I still own, despite finding it incredibly challenging. I think I played it with you once, Rich, and we both decided that we weren't funny enough to play it. It asks you to make some jokes about some. They're not necessarily like rude, but they are like it's. Jokes about lizards being on a camping trip doesn't necessarily come to you straight away sometimes, like it maybe needs to be played. I think it's some of these games, rather than putting people on the spot, maybe need to be played like, played by email kind of thing, like the old war games. Just give
me a couple of hours to workshop some stand-up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a snakes and ladders jokes in here somewhere.
But it's interesting because as game designers, sometimes the first thing that goes in our repertoire is playing a lot of other people's games because we're playtesting, we're thinking about a specific mechanic. And yet the experience I love about a board game cafe is that whole, like, you're not asking someone to buy the game. And so you're really just kind of matching that game by preference and the occasion. And as designers, we definitely think about, well, when would someone play this game? Like, what are we making it? And if we're playing it for this, right? If it's a couple, we're going to take it traveling a lot. It should be able to, move around, or, if it's a kid's game or they're tiny pieces, there's probably other siblings around. And so how do you incorporate a whole family? And all of these questions.
There are tiny pieces. When are they flavored? At least get good flavors.
Yes.
That's really true. Edibility of components is a big factor in me buying a game. Have you ever played Galaxy Trucker?
For the 3 and under set.
It's the way to make it not a choking hazard is to make it out of hard candy.
Yeah.
And then they can just, dissolve it.
Like, I really wish those little green batteries in Galaxy Trucker were edible. They look absolutely delicious. They're these little green glass beads that you can see through.
Well, I'm curious if we have a recommendation yet.
Yeah. So how does it?
Just jumping in. I mean, I think Dickie was like, oh yeah, I've got loads of recommendations to go around.
I'm between 3 at the minute. I'd like to narrow it down a little bit more. In terms of your guys' preferences of games, because I think you can hide behind this scenario all you want. We know you're talking about you. It's fine. But
D&D, cats, word games. I mean, that's pretty much me.
Pretty much it. Yeah.
But do you have a preference for cooperative? Or does it need to be competitive?
I think competitive might be better actually for us.
Okay. Yeah.
Interesting.
Because it's sometimes the way, again, with the kind of things we take into account recommending games for first dates is, do we recommend something where no one's going to lose? Is that important? Is that going to make sure the date ends well? Or do we want something where it can be played over a couple of rounds so that no one's pride gets hurt and there's still wins and losses, that kind of thing. And any massive turn-offs for you in board gaming?
Long setup. If the game's going to take an hour to set up and 30 minutes to play, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get that.
I think that's about it.
I have to say, it's the sad thing of this is why I tend to play Potion Explosion more on my phone than on the board game. It's just, it's easy to...
You can have like 3 games in that sort of situation where it would have just taken you so much longer to set up, break down, or repeat. I'd say the one I keep on coming back to is Gloomhaven, because that is such a beast of a box. I don't know if you've played it. But
just over the holidays.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
We have 2 cats in the background that will tell you how great it is to destroy if you try to keep it up on your table.
Yes.
We're like, okay, we've got a week off. Let's go through as much as we can. And it didn't matter. It was all over the place. But
oh, no. I actually recently lost a piece of... in fact, my cat and my dog worked in tandem. My cat knocked off a piece onto my floor, and then my dog ate it. So,
tag team.
I had the same thing just this week.
Really? With the invention of 3D printing, it means that I have managed to reprint the piece that I was missing. However, it looks a little bit worse for wear.
This time, perhaps beef flavored. Or, just in case it happens again. I mean, again, like I said, let's be more thoughtful.
Yeah.
If you're going to eat it, anyway.
That's what making all the board games biodegradable actually means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Edible.
I like this. If we make all of our games edible, we don't have to worry about victory points or keeping score anymore. It's just the more points you get, the more sweet things you get to eat. And at the end, it doesn't matter who won. You all got to eat something.
There is a game that is that, and I'm trying to remember. It's some form of D&D with biscuits, a board made out of biscuits, and you eat the biscuits as you go through.
There was I can't remember her name, and I apologize, but she had a line of edible games, and essentially it was like a cookbook of just different games that you can make with you.
Right, and that's the point. You didn't sell them pre-made. You don't
have to buy a new one every time.
I've never seen it. It was quite an impressive little spread.
Yeah, she was at XOXO Fest, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Let's
get Kim Joy on that. Come on.
There's a designer in the UK called they're called Honey Badger Games, and they do edible polyhedral dice. So they do dice sets that are gummy. And then they also did, I don't know if they still do it, but they did a wonderful logic game that was made out of chocolate. So it would be one of these chocolates is poisoned with a mystery flavor. And you would have to, you played a logic puzzle. Each player would have different information. That the one of the white chocolates is poisoned. One of the
that's obvious.
That kind of thing.
White chocolate.
Yeah. But yeah, you would change. You would have to kind of whittle it down by eating chocolate throughout the game until one of you ate the poison chocolate and lost. And the poison chocolate, I believe, was Marmite flavored.
Oh. Well, I'm just saying, up till that point,
horrendous.
This is the first date game I want to play. Chocolate, I'm in.
Keith, this is your story to tell, not mine. But we're married, so I'm going to tell it and record it and put it on the internet. But when Keith was a kid, he would make hard candies.
That's true.
But he would swap the color and the flavoring so that you would totally.
So you have an orange flavor, it would be flavored orange, but colored purple, or it would be flavored lemon, but colored green, just because it was fun to take them into school, and this is something I did in 2nd or 3rd grade. You take them into school and everybody thinks they know exactly what they're getting, and then it just doesn't match. And it's that degree to which our color creates assumptions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like it would upset me.
Upset you? Yeah.
I'm very particular.
Well, I suppose it's fine if you like all of the flavors, but if you're very particular, you're like, I only like the purple ones, thank you very much. And then you're just like, oh no, what's going on here? The trust has been broken.
Do you have the made up flavor of blue raspberry?
I was about to say, I think I'm responsible for that personally. That they were like, well, okay, colors don't even mean anything anymore. It can be blue raspberry.
It's not even a thing, but it's like a made up flavor in candy here in the US. I don't know if you have it there a lot, or like that's an illegal.
I would imagine it's called something different.
Yeah.
I don't know. We get like bubblegum flavor, which is blue.
Yeah.
But what does that even mean? Like bubblegum flavored, like it's just nonsense.
Mm. Yeah.
Interesting. It's not, I was going to be like, it's the same, just saying it after a color, like orange. I was like, oh, wait a second. Doesn't quite make sense.
I feel like you still have sometimes out here, you'll get flavors that are just colors. Like there is a soda brand that sells red pop as if the flavor is just red.
Yeah.
But
the scary thing about it is that maybe they legally can't use the word cherry because it doesn't have enough cherry or something.
I have an American friend who it blew his mind when he came over here that our orange soda, as he would call it, is yellow because it's orange juice and it's orange flavored soda. Whereas for him, he'd only seen orange soda colored orange throughout his life, so he'd assumed it was soda that was orange rather than soda that was flavored orange.
Like a slice of American cheddar.
It didn't even occur to me that was something that people had to contend with.
Is that a legal thing? Is there not enough orange juice in orange soda, so they color it orange so they don't have to change the name?
Yeah.
I think either that or certain colors being banned here. We're a little bit picky about what we put in foods over here. Yeah.
The most interesting one was the literally orange juice. The difference
you still have
orange juice
here in so this is like a little
which is basically
I mean I say all this, we're picky about what we put in our food. I have Iron Brew, which is, as far as the label is concerned, is made out of rust. And they won't tell us what flavor it is, but I love it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, having it is one of the items in like if you go into a supermarket, they'll be like in the international section, there'll be like little British foods, and it'll be like HP sauce, Iron Brew. There'll be like digestive biscuits,
Arrow.
Is Arrow
a British thing?
It's often stuck in
it's stuck in there. Okay. I mean, a lot of it is what expats have identified, so it may not be popular anymore there, but it's what is always like maybe they,
I spent a couple years living in China, and my for some reason I craved sandwiches, and I also craved Cadbury's fingers. Those were the two things that were like, I just have to have these. I don't know why.
You don't mean Cadbury, chocolate covered biscuits. You mean like actual fingers of this fellow Cadbury.
There's a limited supply, really.
I can't believe you're hoarding them all. There's only 10 in the world. Jeez.
I've already eaten 3 and I'm coming for the rest. To keep board game tenuously related, what would you have on the table if you were playing game? It feels like an event whenever I go. I'm like, okay, I've got to bring something for the table. Is there something you'd go to?
Well, Simon & Schuster just published a really great book on game night snacks and recipes, which I'm excited. I got a copy of. I'm excited to test out. There's like 9 different popcorn flavor recipes in there that seem easy to do and like that I'm so excited to try. So that's one. Definitely. Keith's a chocolate guy. We actually have a whole safe in our house has just chocolate in it. And I'm not kidding. It has our passports and chocolate. So whenever we're traveling, you take the passports out and you smell them, and they smell like chocolate.
It's amazing. Are these particularly valuable chocolates, or are you just decided that they were the most valuable thing to you?
Well, in finding out things as a couple that temperament wise, I'm the youngest of 4 kids by like 8 years, and growing up in our family, there was like only when my mom did the weekly shop there would be a sweet thing in there. And so, the car would pull up, mom, with all the groceries, and my brothers would like tear down the stairs, who are like 8 and 11 years older than I am, and help with the groceries just meant like picking out all the good stuff and then eating it even before the stuff was put away.
Oh, wow.
So anything that's sweet that like comes into my house, and I think I'm getting better at this as I'm, in my 50s now, but I'm like, that has to be eaten now. And whereas Keith, he like would hide it, and it would be like
that would be the similar situation, because I was also the youngest child, but my response was not eat it right away. My response was like hide it in the sofa cushions for when you actually wanted it.
So it was like the first year of our marriage, and I would find like toffee crisps on the very back of like the
soup cabinet.
The soup cabinet, and they would be expired from our like last trip, that we got them at, and and he's like, "Oh, I'll have to throw it away." I'm like, "Throw it away!" Oh, I totally forgot about that. So like, really great chocolate and I'm like, we cannot have chocolate all over our house, but I know you need a safe. So I 1 year for a gift, I bought him the safe that I don't have the combination to. For all of his chocolate, too.
That is true love.
Yes. But I can at any time just ask for a variety of chocolates, and, a small amuse-bouche is put together for me and presented. So it's quite lovely.
This is great. It's like Keith's guruing chocolate for you.
Yes.
Like you've gone to a chocolate cafe and just asked for a recommendation.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what I do.
Yeah. I am very aware of, when it comes to snacks, of like putting your hands in a bowl that's shared, putting it in your mouth, and then touching components. Like in this post-pandemic world and conventions and things like that, I just find that kind of gross. So I like things that can be given to individuals that,
I hadn't even considered this as a pitfall to Keith's edible components idea. I was more thinking of if like playing a game and just seeing that someone was chewing, and just immediately that cheating impulse of like, what have you done? That would be what would go through my head.
I still think that this is going to be a game that basically accepts the fact that we're all going to die. Share your
right.
the dice.
Just enjoy the ride.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be the
You will lose
We'll
one of your friends at the end of this.
The Last Supper. Nice. Okay.
Oh my God, that's so good. Other than you'd be literally selling it just in Tesco's or Walmart.
Yeah.
And you just got like in there, just be like, hey, this if you want to poison your friends, here you go.
Oh, no,
1 in 12 chance.
We would be put on some sort of Florida man's ban list short. And my apology for anybody in Florida who would be interested in the game The Last Supper. But I maybe you might want to edit that part.
I'm just saying for the poison your friends game, Yellow Jackets, if you want to license a game.
When people are looking at Ravine, I'm always like, that's Yellow Jackets, the game. It's really fun.
I do love that game. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Yellow Jackets, the show?
I haven't seen it yet, but I've been told
about
it.
Teens in Ravine, cannibalism,
have
just the usual stuff.
Have crashed. They're on like some sort of teen crap, like cheerleading thing.
It's a soccer team.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard on my to watch list. It's just where I can find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not easily accessible in the UK.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
But
so
not a recommendation.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. Time for some recommendations then. Who would like to go first?
I can go first.
Okay, sure then.
Yeah, you had a very specific pitch, and I have cherry picked.
Do you want to remind them what the pitch is then? We haven't talked about it in long enough. Ben, what was the pitch?
So we wanted a game that doesn't take too long to set up, is appropriate for a couple, can be taken maybe on a train or a plane, involves dice and maybe words and maybe not much spelling and fantasy and cats. And I think that's everything, right? Maybe some other elements. Now, I don't play a lot of word games, so I've just ignored that part of the ask entirely. I've got 0 recommendations for games to do with words. So instead, I'm pitching a card drafting game called Fantasy Realms. which ticks a few of the boxes. I don't know if you've played it or not. I only recently played it, and that's why it's in my brain and I can't get rid of it. But it's essentially a card drafting game. You have a hand of 7 cards, and there's a line of cards in the middle. And in your turn, it's incredibly simple. You pick up either a random card off the deck or one of the visible cards from the area in the middle, and then you discard one of your cards and put it down in the middle. And you're trying to build a hand. So it's a bit sort of like classic card games, but this has got a fantasy twist. You've got all the standard fantasy tropes. You've got elves, dwarves, wizards, hydras, dragons, that kind of thing. And certain creatures and characters prefer to be with other characters. So maybe you've got an amazing dwarven airship, but you've also got a storm card. And so now your airship is worth no points because it can't fly in the storm. Or maybe you've got a fire elemental, but it's also raining. So you need to get rid of your rain so your fire elemental can be good. But then maybe getting rid of your rain is bad because your opponent picks that up because they've got some kind of elemental weather wizard who wants as many weather effects as possible. So you're trying to work out
Star Realms, but a little bit more interaction of cards rather than purchasing cards and kind of moving things around.
It's more. It's not so as intricate as Star Realms or what's the other one called? Hero Realms. It's more just you're building a hand, and at the end of the game, you reveal your hand and count up the score, and whoever has the highest score wins.
Rummy Gin sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly like Rummy or Gin. You're building sets, and as your opponent picks up certain cards, you're trying to guess what they're building for. So you're trying to build around that and not give them the cards they need, while also trying to hoover up the cards you do want.
Right. Interesting.
It's pretty straightforward. It takes about 20 minutes to play. It's quite fast paced. You only literally need the space to lay out 7 cards, so you can play it on a very small area, very easy to travel with. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and I thought maybe you would too.
All right.
Excellent. Do you have any questions on that, or do you want to save them for once everybody's pitched their game?
Yeah, I think
we'll save it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Dickie, would you like to go next?
Yeah. So I'm kind of coming at words from a different angle. This is a storytelling game called Once Upon a Time that I'm absolutely still in love with. It's one of the first things we got for the cafe when we opened, and I absolutely adore it. It's cool. So it's from 1993, so it's quite an old game now. I didn't realize it was quite that old, but it's a storytelling game. You'll each have a different ending in your starting hand, and you'll have a hand of cards that might be a character, or it might be an item, or it might be a thing, and you have to include that thing in your story. So your story kind of rambles on, and each time you say a word that's in your hand, you play it down, and you're a step closer towards getting to your ending. However, if you mention a word that is in the other person's hand, they can interrupt you and take over the story.
Ooh.
And the reason I thought this might be good is that I kind of see this as a yin and yang clash between Jenn's image of fantasy and Keith's image of fantasy, both existing in the same world, but the story being taken in different directions. And I like that kind of epic clash between, I hesitate to say good and evil, but possibly cuddly and scaly. But yeah, this kind of tug of war between your two stories and the endings that you kind of both want to reach. So when you've played the final card from your hand, you have to try and make your ending work with everything that's happened in the story, both of what both people have said, and you can be challenged on how well something fits into a story as well. So you can't just say, and then they died, which I've seen happen a couple of times.
That's how you win at improv. Yeah. Everyone knows this.
Yeah. Then they got hit by a truck.
Put a full stop in the middle of that sentence. But yeah, it's got these really kind of beautiful kind of fantasy illustrations, very kind of soft watercolor, but with that kind of edge of darkness underneath it, which is nice. And it's a really thing. It can be played by more people, but it's It's very, very travel worthy. It's one of these things. It's got a box that's about the size of a standard novel. It's kind of a small box-ish game, but then you open that up and it's just air. There's 2 decks of cards and that's it. So that's all you need to do. So for a travel version, just two packs of cards, and then you're off and ready once you know the rules and stuff. But yeah.
I will say that maybe that was one of the most beautifully pitched games that I've heard, because it's really rare to talk. Like, a lot of times when people are talking about a game, they'll kind of run into the mechanics of, and what you just did was actually just share like a nice balance between mechanics, but then kind of give us a picture of what that experience might be like for us playing. And that's why people love to play games. Like, they want to be able to know what they're getting into, not just this is how a card moves on the table. And so anyway, I love that. And I'm like, we should play that game now. I'm like, we should play that. We have that, like, several copies of that game, I think, but it's been years since we played. So, awesome. All right. Thank you. I no giveaways. I mean, he's
final.
No.
Yeah. It's often pitched as a game for like 4 or 5 people because the story can go in lots of different directions. But as a 2-player game, I think it's a bit more of like, they hesitate to use the word intimate, but it's a bit more of a personal experience. Yeah.
I think it's great.
So all to play for. We're coming into the last round here. I might have to pivot now that Dickie's done such a great one. I think my original one that I did mention was going to be QWERTY. However, based on this, I might go for a So Clover, which is one that has been mentioned. Dickie just mentioned this before, but it's a very good game for couples who are trying to figure out how each other thinks. So Clover, you get this kind of plastic 4-leaf clover, and then what will happen is you're drawing some words, and then they get placed on the clover. And so what will happen is on each of the 4 leaves, it'll kind of have 2 words will be matched. And the idea is that you're trying to communicate with each other the orientation of these words on the clover. So they all get 4 of these circles get stuck on, and then you'll write in removable ink what joins those 2 together. But the idea is that you've got 4 of these sides and you're trying to link all of them, and then during the game you're going to throw in a 5th one to mix up to make it really difficult. And the idea is that you might say something like it'll be like pirate and accounting, and then you'll be like, okay, how do I mix pirate and accounting in a fun way that my partner will remember what that is, or think about what it is and how it's associated. And you might just say banker, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, absolutely. So the idea is that you'll have these 4 words around the side, and you're trying to get them into the correct orientation after I've done a terrible job of explaining this already. The first part of it is to write out what you think it is, and then you break it down, and then you give it a shuffle, and then you place it back, and then you give it to your partner, and then they basically will try and figure it out. Now, it's good in multiple people, like several, but it works in 2 players. I played it with my wife, and we've enjoyed it very much, although it's a little bit more of a game where you're just kind of like looking at them as they're trying to orientate these circles with words on. You're like, okay, well, these 2 work over here, but it doesn't necessarily work over here. Pirates, but I've just got a word that says ship on, and then they're trying to figure out how that will work. So
I've never actually thought of that game as a thinking how, like, learning how somebody else thinks. I think of that as like code names. Like I love recommending that for people who are new to games, for like teenagers, or like they're going on a camping, they're going away for the weekend or something, and with their parents. And I was like, this is a great way to kind of understand how each other is thinking without like the pressure of like, of different things. But I love it's So Clever or So Clover? Which one?
So Clover.
Okay.
In the UK, at the very least, it's So Clover.
Okay. And it has like these little plastic four leaf clover things, and each petal holds a pre-done card.
Yep.
And then in the center, you write on a whiteboard thing what kind of connects them together. And then when you take the cards off, that person has to kind of figure out what order and which petal they were on, right?
Yeah, what orientation they might be. So if you've got a leaf that has two slots on it and the word written on it is spreadsheet, it might take you a minute to work out that one of those words could be, and you'll have like 5 cards in front of you, all that can be twisted in different orientations. So you might have to work out that, one of them is spread, one of them's butter, and one of them's blanket, and together they come together to be spreadsheet, because Rich is absolutely right. It's that window into how people think. My favorite one of all time was 2 words, nail and moon. And someone had been thinking for absolutely ages about how they were going to link these things, and the clue they went with was Armstrong. And when I realized that it was Neil Armstrong, I loved that person so much more. It was just that kind of like window into their sense of quite a dry person, that I hadn't really got a read on. And then as soon as they did that, I was like, oh, you're okay. We like you. Yeah, that's nice.
I'm still thinking about pirates and accountants and just thinking of the Clemson.
How do you think those two?
Monty Python.
Well read.
And then Clover is kind of like a nice, I think a little bit more concrete. Have you ever played Medium?
Yes.
Where you're kind of thinking of, which is fun, but it's still that like, what's the connection between 2 words, and are you kind of connecting with it? But you can't really play that game in 2 words.
So I'm curious. I mean, Jennifer Ellis, don't
ask me. I would say Over. I would say Once Upon a Time, and what was the third?
You were just asking this question because you want to be prepared for when someone asks you.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, I'm gonna put some things here.
I do have one thing to say that I find interesting, and this is I think it's a cultural thing too. Is the whole category of storytelling games. As we make a lot of, Keith has made Gloom, of course, the Adventure Zone, we call a storytelling game because it is a card-based RPG, and we don't really want it to be in the category of like, it's a one-shot type thing. It's lighter. And I find it interesting. I do feel like, I don't know if it's a cultural thing in the UK with there's more storytelling as kind of part of the nature there, and like, oh, you have a radio show that is like the short story, like there's already these connections, whereas like it's very interesting to me when I walk into a game store in the US, there's no section for storytelling games, or people don't really necessarily always call them out as their own genre. It's a card game. Well, Gloom is a much better game when you're playing with the story and you're telling the story than that. And also, what is Once Upon a Time without that storytelling element? So I just feel like you lean into it more, and like there's
I think they can sometimes get lumped in with party games as something that is not necessarily a thoughtful experience, or something that's maybe not as kind of involved, and that you don't kind of give yourself to. It's something that's just happening around you. But I absolutely think the more you put in, the better your experience is going to be. I've played games of Gloom with people who insist that they just want to play the numbers game side of it and want to leave the storytelling out. And for me, that is such a lesser experience. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've played with people who just want to play the storytelling and not the numbers as well. So it's just kind of where people's brains lie. But for me, it needs kind of both sides of it.
As the creator of the game, I would be more inclined to play it with just the story than with just the numbers, if I had to do one or the other. I mean, again, I agree with you. It's supposed to be the balance. But if I had to choose between those, the story to me is what makes it unique. But anyway, I have questions because we got to narrow this down.
Yeah, we got to narrow this down.
So first of all, we've got So Clover, we've got Fantasy Realms, and we've got Once Upon a Time. And I would like to know, how long do each of these games take?
Well, for my one, for Fantasy Realms, Board Game Geek says 20 minutes. It's hard for me to say because I played it like 6-player and it definitely took longer than that. But with 2-player, I imagine 20 minutes, maybe even 15.
Yeah, I mean, with So Clover, you can probably put a round out in 10 minutes for 2 players, really. It's really not that long. It really depends on how creative you're being when it comes to those words, or whether or not you're adding challenges to yourself. Because you could play it over an hour and then you'd be like, okay, you can't reuse words, you can't do this, that, and the other. And then you could become like a really interesting experience by kind of enriching that with other ideas as you go along.
So are you saying So Clover is a short game that you could play multiple rounds of?
Yes.
Okay.
With Once Upon a Time, it very much depends on the players because, you know, it's up to you whether or not you put 15 minutes of backstory into the woodcarver who, you know, has, you know, how deep do we want to go into the woodcarver's backstory? What's his motivation? But you can just go, there's a woodcarver who has an axe that chops a tree. That, you know, it is up to you, and it's kind of one of these. It's a bit of a gaseous game. It will fill the container it is given, you know. So if you are on that long train journey, you can kind of, you know, meander a little bit through the story rather than kind of dash through it. But yeah, it's kind of up to you. But I would say if you're playing Once Upon a Time over for 45 minutes, you're probably bored. So yeah, I would say the kind of sweet spot is about that kind of 20 for a 2-player game at least. Is about that kind of 20-25 minutes game.
I've made my pick, Keith.
Well, see, I still have one more question, okay. and I think the answer is
and separate checks, really, so we can both have, you know, something different on our list.
The main thing is I think everything's equal here, but I just have to make sure I haven't missed something, which is I love dice games. Are any of these have dice at all?
I'm afraid not with mine, no.
Wow, no, that's an oversight.
Right, I think you're all even on that, though, so it doesn't factor in. If someone had put a dice game in there, I might have felt I had to weight that. But all right, Jennifer, what do you got?
I'm shocked at myself that this is my choice, but I will say, you know, I'm going to take the mask off and say it's me. I'm the person, and I'm for us. I know, shocking. So all of these games I want to play. So they're all on our list now. You've all pitched, done a great job. But as far as you know, what I would want to play when I was really thinking about this moment here, it is. Fantasy Realms is one where I would be really afraid that Keith would totally min-max every situation. He would have gotten the app if there was an app beforehand and totally figured everything out and kind of take some of the joy out of it.
I would not have done that. I would have gone in the day before to talk to him. Totally different situation.
I don't feel like your partner's actions should take away from my recommendation. This is definitely a user end issue.
Yeah. I agree. I'm just saying that I would enjoy that game, but as a partner dynamic, I probably wouldn't feel like this is going to be a highlight of our trip. This is just going to be something I'm just going to be like, really, you know, and then I'm going to have to do my own, like, you know, montage of getting up to speed and
training montage.
The Once Upon a Time story, Once Upon a Time, which I do remember playing with you a very long time ago. So I think I had this like wonderful fantasy of us playing that game when you were describing it. And but I also know that we tend to play games when we're traveling. So coming up this week, we're on a little board game tour of the Pacific, a board game cafe tour of the Pacific Northwest. We're doing these Illimat second edition like stuff, and it's going to be really great. But by the time the evening rolls around, we're going to be a little tired. And that's kind of where my energy peters out as far as stories, whereas Keith kind of keeps on going. So again, another game that I like, but I have to be in prime form in order to win, which, again, this is why competitive is okay with me. I kind of want to be on an even ground, which is really hard with him. So I like that, but maybe not for today. So it's so clever. Clover. And also, it doesn't have the dice, but those little plastic green clover things are really cute. So it kind of adds I brought out, for the train journey, here's a couple of bottles of this, and look at these cute little green things. We're going to play a game. And the words are generated for me. So I don't all I have to do is kind of find those connections and understand that other person. So the focus is on them rather than me beating them. So maybe I did want something cooperative all along.
I knew that. Absolutely. I read into
that's
what was
the real
mask
mask being revealed. Yeah.
That's my pick for this. So now we're going to have to pick this up before we go to Seattle on Thursday.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
And I accept that Jen set the challenge. So I know you haven't had two guests before, but I'm just saying I feel that Jen's
but again,
pick
separate picks. What's night two? I mean, I'm going to host the first night's game.
Yeah,
this is a game.
Because I was going to do a cat-based dice game that was highly competitive, and so
yeah.
I don't know. I will say I am certainly interested in hearing this in Fantasy Realms, just because I haven't played it and love a good semi-classic, with a fantasy twist. So I'm very curious about that in terms of whereas.
So something you would pick up beforehand, just because, as a designer, you want to understand how.
Sure, just so I understand how it works. Of course, like I said, I was at the cafe yesterday because I thought that's what we were going to be playing. And now we're playing So Clover, apparently, and all that time I spent is completely wasted. And so just completely out of the tree in terms of what would I randomly, pick if I was on my own. I'm curious about Fantasy Realms. Once Upon a Time, and I almost called it Over the Edge because that is another of my favorite things from Atlas Games. Once Upon a Time, I love, but of course that's one just I know better. Mm-hmm. So whereas Fantasy Realms is getting the edge because I'm like, oh, sounds interesting.
Yeah,
I'd like to see how that works.
Yeah.
But I still feel you set the challenge that your vote should.
All right, So Clover it is.
I support it.
Yeah, but 3 great recommendations that we would definitely literally try. And I think other than So Clover, we actually have all of those games. We have a lot of games in Shrink Wrap.
I think we're getting Hero Realms and Fantasy Realms mixed up.
Yeah.
We have Fantasy Realms.
Okay, well, let's dig deeper. We've got bins.
Amazing. Well, I definitely didn't see that coming. What a twist
congratulations.
at the end.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
but
thank you so
again,
much.
3 amazing pitches, 3 kind of understanding, that's the amazing thing about a board game cafe. I love them so much because they're people who are really, really reflective of what experience you're going to have and kind of what, the vibe that a game creates, right? I always call them you're creating a little milieu on someone's kitchen table. What's that world we're creating? So even if it's a board game and not a RPG or something, we're still creating a vibe there. What is it? And if so, let's lean into it more and kind of understand what we're doing. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for picking the correct game. You can definitely come back. Much appreciated. But no, well, thank you for taking all the time out from your busy creative lives. Where can people find you? What are you up to?
Yeah, so we're very busy. We just released the 2nd edition of Illimat, which is a classic style game that feels like something that came from another time or you found in your grandfather's attic.
Like a classic card game with a fantasy twist.
Yeah, no, there's no fantasy in it. But it has kind of like a mystical related. So it's kind of classic style mechanics. but with some dynamic changes that go through a little kind of tarot-esque vibe to it. And then soon to be released Cool, which is a fun little slap game of fun slang, affirmative slang, that has variant rules and combinations that you have to get and play in order to win the pile. And so it kind of creates a fun, slightly manic atmosphere, but it's all words of great joy. In fact, one of the reasons that inspired us to make the game is we would be demoing games. We were in Boston and we were teaching people how to play Illimat, and someone asked us if we can do a move, and they said cool, and then someone would say cool, and they would echo back and forth. And then we went from Boston to the UK, and we were in Glasgow, and someone did that, and like they did the same exact thing. And I was like, so it was this fun call and response of kind of universal coolness. And we just kind of thought, well, it's a word that means all these wild different things, and let's just have some fun with it. And I think just strange and wild joy is always on the table. So.
And I love the distinction between the person who you say, can they do this move? And you say yes, and they say cool. And the person who says, okay, how's this stockpiling work? And you say, well, you do this and that. And they go, cool. And, either way, very different and yet the same word.
We also have a new expansion for Illimat called the False Baron set, and the Syzygy coin, which has some in-game effects.
Okay. I am very excited.
Twogether Studios is Twogether. Did I spell that right?
Yes.
I can't spell.
Together.com
is where you can find everything. Shipping from the US into the UK is terrible. So, but all of them are in distribution, hopefully in your friendly local game store and game cafe soon. So,
and aside from that, you can also find me on Patreon if you where I run a game once a month for anyone who wants to play.
Yeah.
So
a D&D game.
Yeah, D&D game. So Keith Baker on Patreon. And also I've been writing for a video game called Wayfinder that is coming out in a couple months. So keep an eye out for that.
Oh, very cool.
Just throwing in like the full spectrum.
Of all
we do.
Yeah.
You will see us soon, if nothing else. That's kind of where you're going with this. Like, we're just everywhere.
Yeah,
there's no avoiding it.
It would be really cool because we're doing this tour of this chain of game cafes in the Pacific Northwest. Wouldn't it be cool to do one in the UK and just if they had like one that had like multiple
game cafes?
We would just go, and if we knew the old person, that would be really cool.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Only.
I'm sorry, I actually don't know any. It's a tough one.
I figured there probably wasn't anything out there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And Ben, where can everyone find us?
Well, please leave a review of the podcast on your app of choice. Check us out on the YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. And please share and tell your friends. And we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.